And so I knew that an internship was something that we needed to do, and I kind of started, last year was my first time really going on professional auditions, and actually my friend TJ had found an audition in the Columbus area, which I'm from Dublin, which is right outside of Columbus, and he was like, hey, well, do you want to come with me? And I thought, well, why not? Always keep it fresh, and I had the right materials that I had built in my auditioning class in the fall semester. They just wanted 2 16 bars from a rock musical, and so I had those in my repertoire, and I was like, all right, let's go knock this out. So we went to the CATCO Theater in Columbus, Ohio, and we auditioned for Evil Dead the Musical, which is based off of the 80s horror movies with Bruce Campbell in them that are pretty hokey. And did my audition, and I actually got an email later that night of them offering me to be a female swing, which is an understudy. But as a swing, I was the only understudy, and for the 4 roles in the show, the 4 female roles in the show, I understudied all of them, and then I was also offered to be a crew member backstage. So I was very excited about this. Only problem was the date of when they were going to start rehearsals was in conflict with the concert choir tour, which I am involved in concert choir. So I told them that it was a couple of logistics I needed to figure out first, but I would really love to take advantage of this opportunity. I set up a meeting with Dr. Makuch, and I explained what was going on and how this was a way for me to take my first step in professional theater, build my resume, and I was actually going to be paid and be working with professionals in the business and also fulfill my internship hours as needed for the theater degree. So he understood, he was very understanding. He was like, I know that this is the better step for your career, so I wouldn't want to discourage you to not take advantage of this. So I ended up missing concert tour last summer, but I did get to start with Evil Dead. The rehearsal started in late May, and my first experience of meeting the cast and crew was they invited me to come see a stumble through in their rehearsal area. So that was always great to come in and put names to faces of people I had been emailing. And one of the first things I noticed was all of the actors were a lot older than me. The show is about 5 college students who go up to a cabin in the woods for spring break, and I noticed I was the only actual college student. But it was really sweet to meet all of them and to hear how they were interpreting each character. Because I have been doing like solo work at home, learning lines and songs, and kind of just trying to make each character very different and specific, putting a lot of work forth that I learned from my voice and movement class in the spring semester, how, you know, to make each of these women an individual so that if I ever did go in, that it would work out nicely. The 4 different types of women I played, there was like the girl next door girlfriend, Linda. Then there was the like ditzy, blonde, Shelly. Cheryl was the geeky sidekick sister. And then Annie, who's the melodramatic, loves every word she says, girl. So each of them were really fun to learn about and definitely had different styles of way of delivering their lines and their songs. So it was great to see the stumble through and be able to see that most of the things I had inferred for the characters was on the right track with what the director had been giving the actors for the show. So then, what did we do? So the cast still had a couple rehearsals before they added both of the swings, because there was just me and a male swing. And then we started doing texts, and for the first like few texts, I was able to sit out in the audience and watch them in the real space. And then, so while I was doing that, I was like writing furious blocking notes in my script, trying to think like, oh, I can just learn this, and then that doesn't always happen, but at least I would have an idea of what I was supposed to do when I was on stage. We did a dress preview, and we did a couple of previews before we actually opened. And something very neat and different about this show is that it has a splatter zone. And yes, it is fake blood with the splatter. So we added that in the last week, and around that time I was also being backstage, no longer watching it, and just learning what I needed to do backstage, such as hand off props and preset props. What were other things? Crawl under the cellar trap door and place mats down there because somebody was going to fall into them. And then after the show, I had the great time of learning how to mop up fake blood. So, chocolate and red paint. It was great. I can see Renee's face like, oh, that sounds delicious. So once we had opened is when we started doing the swing rehearsals. And what we would do is myself and the male swing, his name was Drew, we would come in the afternoon before we had an evening show, and we'd rehearse for a few hours. The first week we started with music rehearsals with the music director, and it would just be the two of us with the music director and our stage manager, which was something I wasn't expecting. I thought that right off the bat we'd be working with the full cast the whole time, and maybe, or not the full cast, but like they'd have anybody who we weren't learning that day. But what we did instead was we just kind of would sit there with the full book, with the full script and songs, and we'd go through and hit them all out, and you would just, if there were harmonies, you'd go through it once and be one character, and then you go back through it again and be the different character. And then we also did, the next week we did, what did we do? Choreography, which is very fun because there's a bunch of different songs in it. One's very like disco, another one's just, the first opening number is Cabin in the Woods, and it's this peppy, upbeat, like totally musical theater thing to make you think that it's just going to be this happy-go-lucky show. And so then we did that, and then we learned our blocking, and actually during the week of when we were learning our blocking, my fellow swing had been fired, which was also surprising. It just turned out that his attitude towards being a backstage tech hand, but being hired as an actor was really reflecting in his work ethic and his attitude, and the company, you know, wasn't going to put up with that. So for me, it was my eyes going, all right, you can't do it, they will not let you do it. So really like great learning experience for myself of keeping my head up and knowing that, well, this is where I want to be. And they did reassure me. They were like, Katie, I don't want you to get spooked and think like you're the next one to go. And I was like, okay, thank you. And what they actually did after that is I would have just solo rehearsals where I finished learning my blocking and fight choreography. And then they started to add me in during the fight calls before the shows. And I'd say around the third weekend of the show, they had, and it's like the whole cast come and they did a put-in rehearsal for me. So that was a really hectic day because I was running around with these 4 women in my head. But it was a great time, and the cast was so supportive of if I ever got a little like flustered or anything. And we kind of made it a fun time because it would be like, all right, tag team, Katie, you're in. I was like, okay. Jump into the scene, or have to run around backstage and like exit as Linda and then run around and come in for Annie's entrance. So it was a great time, and working with the actors has been so great, was so great. One of them, actually the guy who plays Scott, his name is Peter, and he was actually on Broadway and lives in Ohio because that's where his wife was, but they're moving back to New York. But it was interesting to talk to him. He had studied at Point Place, and he was actually in the original cast of Hairspray as Brad, so you go home and listen to that soundtrack, and the guy who goes, I'm Brad! That's him! I was like, I know him! So that's been pretty cool to say. And I think that was another advantage that slowly like sank in of, even though they're not like at peer level with me, that I was able to just pick their brains of, all right, so like how did you get here kind of a thing. you know, and I talked to, Peter mentioned how he had done like the Disney internships, and he was like, I would walk around in the big old suits and stuff like that, and you know, you have to start somewhere. So for me, starting with Evil Dead was a great opportunity, and they have said like, hey, be sure to stay in touch, you know, let us know what's going on. And it was just so convenient because I live in Dublin, Ohio, so I was able to go home and still get mom's home cooking, but also be paid and be in the business that I want to be in for the rest of my life. Yes, so I also brought some pictures from the show, and there's no, oh, okay. Cool, all right. So Evil Dead the Musical was at CATCO, Columbus, Ohio. CATCO stands for Contemporary American Theater Company. And this works. Cool. This is our stage. It was raised actually 40 inches off of ground level. And what was something cool with it is it starts off in a car scene as they're driving to the cabin in the woods. So right here, these were actually 2 panels that opened up. And then the actors would sit right back there, and it looked like they were in a car. And so it was in thrust. There's audience here, and then you're seeing it from the center audience space. And as I mentioned, we had splatter zones. These are the blood pumps backstage. The blood recipes was something was an ongoing process throughout the full run, and it ran from June 3rd to July 23rd. So definitely learning how to recreate that each night was also something that I had never seen before. I'm used to doing a weekend or 2 weekends of a show, and to hear and watch the actors keep it something fresh every night was really interesting, and it took so much stamina. I could see it when they would come off stage. They're like, all right, I gotta keep it up. So these are the blood pumps backstage. We actually had a couple recipes going on about the blood. They'd have the chocolate syrup and paint, and then sometimes you'd have to strain it in order for it to go through the pumps correctly. Or we also had water with a little chocolate syrup and the bathtub fizzies that turn your water a different color. They had a recipe of you need 15 yellow, 20 red, and 10 blue or something like that, and that stuff tasted really nasty. So did the chocolate syrup and the paint. At first you're like, oh, this smells okay, so, and then you get the aftertaste, and that wasn't fun. So backstage, this was the list of all of our to-do things for each of the technicians backstage. There were 4 of us. One of them special and more in focusing on the costumes, and then we had the assistant stage manager and another stagehand besides myself, and we had it blocked off by song, and it was what's your cue line, what you need to do, where that should go. So it was a different experience for myself, because not only was I memorizing lines, songs, choreography, fight choreography, blocking, I also had it memorized as a technical person as well. I feel like I've never known a show as well as I knew Evil Dead, the musical. Some of me even things I might be able to just retell you all of the light cues during one of the songs, because I'd have my headset on and I no longer heard it just for the songs. I would hear, go, light cue 15, go. I'm like, oh, okay, so.
Katie, in the interest of time, I need to stop you here.
Okay.
We might be able to revisit this, but Nathan has a 7 o'clock class.
Okay.
So we'll hold on Katie, because your conflict is a little bit more flexible. And we'll turn our attention to Nathan Bradley. Thank you so much.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nathan Bradley. I'm a junior theater major. And my internship over the summer was I was a camp instructor at a fine arts camp at the Paramount Arts Center in Ashland, Kentucky. Also attached to this, I was the stage manager for a production of Footloose the Musical that happened there as well. So that came to me through my brother, actually. I started off last year actually searching for internships. I was actually a BA, but so I wasn't required to have an internship at the time, but I still wanted that experience of going and finding something to do professionally. And so I was looking for them, and my brother actually works at the Paramount Arts Center. So, you know, we were talking one day, and I mentioned looking for an internship, and he noted that he had these summer camps coming up at his theater over the summer. And so we started talking about that, and he put me in touch with the director of the education department at the Paramount Arts Center. And she and I started talking. Her name was Melanie Sweeney. And we talked for probably about 3 weeks about what it would entail, what I'd be doing down there. And then she offered me the job, and I said, sure, I'll take that. And it gives me a chance to go down and share what I've learned here and kind of pass it on. And if I can sort of regurgitate what I've learned here, then I must have learned something in the long run. That was my mental process there. And so as the process went along, I got the paperwork turned in and everything, and before I knew it, I was hired for the summer. As I was going along with that as well, Melanie told me that they were doing a musical. At first it was going to be Grease, but that didn't turn out, so they actually did Footloose. And I, called her up one day and said, hey, I'm really interested in doing some additional work while I'm down there to get the experience and do everything that I need to do. What positions do you have available? She said several, but I ended up applying for the stage manager position, which had a little stipend attached to it, but really, I just didn't want to get too bored sitting down there just doing summer camps all summer. So, yeah, about early June, early June, I was officially set up, ready to go, and by mid-June, I was going down for my first audition process. We had 2 days of auditions. I left working at this theater, actually. The day later, I was in Kentucky doing auditions, and before auditions happened, I had gotten a script. I had obtained everything that I really needed to go down there and be prepared for the auditions. And I think that was it was an interesting learning process for me, knowing that these are the things that I will be expected to do once I get down there and just help things out. And so I arrived at the auditions. I walk in, I get all my things in order, set up the table and all. And it was actually very funny because the director and everyone else there wasn't really used to that. They are a community theater in a professional building that has touring companies and everything like that. So they don't usually have a stage manager who has had some experience in the field and knows the protocol for how things are done, so to speak. So they were very surprised that in the short amount of time I had everything set up and ready to go. At that point I knew it was going to be an interesting summer. But so I did the 2 days of auditions. I helped out with that, and then about a week later I went back down for my stay and started into the summer camps, which was technically the part of the internship that I was focusing on. The stage management was just an added note. So the first day I arrived, they are assigning jobs and all of that. And I'm standing there waiting for my job assignment, and they actually ended up assigning me not as an assistant instructor, but as a sort of office helper guy. It didn't actually have a real name, so it was really odd. But so they gave me that, and I was kind of confused for a little while, but I figured out that really what they wanted me to do was be in the office in case any of the camp counselors needed something from the space, because I was there day and night for stage management anyway, so they knew I knew where everything was. And so it was an interesting experience that I wasn't expecting on having. I went down and ended up working in an office for the entire time I was down there. So I really got to, for the first 5 weeks that I was down there, we had the summer camps, taking a break in the middle for 4th of July in the summer. So I was there checking people in the mornings, making sure the camp counselors had what they needed. And I thought it was very odd to be in that situation because I personally haven't had the opportunity to be in that situation here in Marietta. It's just not something that I've focused on. So when I was down there, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little discouraged, but I quickly found out that it's something that I really needed to learn. It gave me the opportunity to sit and figure out how much it costs if you lose a script, how much it costs to get the royalties for things, how many copies you have to make in a day to make sure the cast has everything you're passing out that night. And it was a really interesting time. Mostly though, I think that the reasoning behind why I feel that way is because having expected to go down there and expected to teach and really do what I do at Marietta College anyways, you know, as far as a college atmosphere, we each learn from each other. So it was something that I was expecting to do, something I was comfortable with, and then I get thrown into the office world that I'm not comfortable with, and it ended up being really great for me, and I did that for the entire time I was there. Other than that though, as I said, I was also stage managing, and as it turned out, the stage management side, while the summer camps and working in the office really helped me learn a side of theater that I hadn't had the chance to learn before, I would say stage managing really allowed me to get that practical experience that I wanted from going down there in the first place. And through the whole process, it was very interesting and mildly tedious figuring out what they expected from me and what my liberties were as a stage manager to do the things that would help me out. One instance being the very first day I showed up, we had our first rehearsal, and we didn't have a call board or a place where we could put up our schedules and who was called for the evening, etc. And I went to the director and asked her about it, and she said, "Yeah, go ahead, go to town, go put one up." Okay, I'll do that. So I went down and I found one and I made it happen. And that little anecdote kind of explains how my summer went. Which turned out to be a good thing in the long run because here we're fortunate enough to be in a situation where we have faculty members and peers looking over our shoulders, making sure that we're doing the correct thing and we know what we're doing. We have that environment where we can kind of experiment. But it was nice going down there and knowing that I was on my own. I had to know the things that I was doing. Granted, of course, I knew that I could call people if I needed to. But knowing that it was my area, my time to shine, kind of. And as it went along, I got more and more comfortable with making decisions, taking charge of what I needed to take charge of, really being a voice there. I also got the chance to work with a union house. Having a union stage crew was very interesting. Not something that I'm really used to. They showed up the very first day of tech and pretty much knew what they were doing, so that was kind of awesome. And so I ended up talking with them a lot. Got several contacts if I ever wanted to take that route in my future career. So my overall experience as a stage manager and as an office assistant, my internship, as I would classify both of those, is that I learned that I have the capacity to do the things that I've been taught in this theater, and I can perform those without someone judging whether or not I get an A or a B. And that's a great thing to know. And it's great to know that I can go out, I can do this and enjoy it. And it's something that I think was very important to realize. Another thing that it taught me was that, there's still a lot more to learn. I mean, I've been through 2 years, I don't know it all. I don't think any of us know it all. And it's something that was struck home. It started being apparent when I was directing last semester, but over the summer during this internship, it really struck me that there's a lot more out there that needs to be learned. Basically, in that professional environment, I was allowed to kind of test the waters in a relatively safe place. It was a community theater. If I did something wrong, they probably wouldn't know anyway. But I held myself to the standard of knowing that there were certain expectations of what I was supposed to do. And I think that was an important thing to really show me that it needs to happen that way. Fortunately, while I was down there, just from meeting people and knowing who's there, knowing who is sort of in the field, when I was down for auditions, I met this woman who was the director of arts in the county. It's some program that they have to kind of bring everything together and really do theater and things and such. So I met her, and through that I ended up getting a lighting design job for one of their open mic nights. They called me up and said, hey, we have this event going on, would you care to come in and focus our lights and make it look pretty? I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that, that's no problem. And right before that, like when I got that call, I was actually working on another show that, because I had gone down and watched my brother perform in a play that this particular director was directing, he knew me, knew what I did, and called me up and asked if I could do this lighting design for him for a play called The Diviners. So I went in for that. They gave me some money for it. It was fantastic. And in the end, it was a really important time to it's a really important time to sit and really act on what we learned here. It was troubling in a good way, knowing that I'm going into this not knowing what to expect, not having the secure environment that we have here. But I think that in general, it was a good experience. And I think that because of those professional experiences that I've had, because I've gone to United States Institute for Theater Technology conference, met professional stage managers, talked with my faculty about it, I was more prepared to take on that role and really dig in and know what is expected of me as far as my craft is concerned. Maybe not the area and the company which I'm working in, but the craft in general. So I think that this summer really helped me see that, and it was a fantastic time. Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan. You've got to go to class.
I do have to go to class like now.
I'll write an email to Jamie. She'll understand. Thank you, sir. Spencer, can you share a few quick minutes of your work up north in Lorraine?
I would love to.
Thanks. Spencer's was not an official internship again, so this is just the kindness of Sharon here.
Yeah. What I did this summer, I stage managed a musical with a youth theater group that I acted in 11 shows. This show was my 12th show with them. It was my first backstage work. I got home from my first year here. I was a freshman, and I didn't really know what I was going to do that summer. I tried out for production of Chicago, and I didn't make it. And then this director that I worked with for a lot messaged me on Facebook, said, would you like to take this opportunity? I said, please, I would love to. And I found out that we were going to do, our show was Once on This Island. It's Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, but it's set in the Caribbean, and it's kind of a depressing show, but gorgeous, gorgeous music. If you've never heard of it, I would highly recommend it. The rehearsal process lasted about 6 weeks. There was a parents meeting on Saturday for the parents to come up and meet the staff and find out what our expectations with the program was. Working with the kids was I loved working with them. I knew a lot of them. There were a few troublemakers, but they weren't too bad. And there was a minor incident, but we still don't know how it happened. But anyway, what my job entailed was I would watch the rehearsals, like wherever my director would. I went with my director, and she would have me write down the blocking and all that. So I wrote that down, and then when it came time to the show, she said, "You're going to be stage managing." I'm like, "Okay." And I ran the light board. I had a headphone set, and I would call the backdrops in and out backstage, and we had 2 spotlight towers on the side, and I would call certain spotlights, and that was a really interesting experience because I ran light board for a show here last semester, and I thought that was a much easier kind of show to manage because it was in a smaller environment, but this show was in a much bigger environment, and that kind of scared me because here mistakes wouldn't be noticeable, but in a bigger environment, yeah. So our dress rehearsal was a Thursday. That was the day where parents could come. That was the only time they could take pictures, and they weren't allowed to videotape because the royalties, we couldn't have that happen. So the dress rehearsal was on Thursday, and it was really, really stressful because I was new at stage managing, and there was a lot of minor mishaps, and I was really freaking out. And then my director told me, "Well, you've got to get on this," and she was very nice about it. She just told me, "You have to get on this." And then one day I just sat home, I marked my script up, and the 3 performances they ran very smoothly. Not a lot of mistakes happened, but it went very well. And the last performance was kind of sad because this director I've worked with for several years with this program, she was retiring, and there was a lot of emotions that day, and it was really, really sad because, and if they ask me to do this again, I'll have to think about it because I don't know if I could transition to another director's style. And the Monday after the closing Sunday performance, there was a day where we just did final cleanup of the office and put stuff away and all of that. And this experience, it was stressful, but it was also fun, and I learned a whole lot. And it taught me how to work with kids, and it taught me how to make sure everything runs smoothly. And if this opportunity came up again, I would probably take it.
Thanks so much, Spencer. And now we have to let you go to concert choir.
Okay.
Conflict management. Do you a short taste of video now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
The baby video.
All right. Of Evil Dead, the musical.
No, they're running the jazz. Okay, I'll just get to the videos then. Here, I'll give you this one. I was also in a attacking tree every night. This was my puppet, and it had lights in it.
You were an attacking tree.
I was an attacking tree every night. The runway that you saw before, I would just walk down that runway, and there's a part where Cheryl gets attacked by a tree, and then I would just lean over, and my tree would attack her. I'd have to say it's some of my best work. Okay, so here's a little taste of... Oh, that's the sound.
Dinosaurs.
Oh, maybe the videos won't show. Maybe that's why it's mad. That might be mad. Let's look. Let's go to this one, please. Nope. Okay, never mind. No videos.
Okay.
So, yeah, your computer roars it.
Godzilla.
Well, that makes much sense. Well, then I guess not. So here's the cast. Nope. Just kidding. Well, I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. Ish.
Well, it was a valiant effort.
Thanks.
We will continue to learn more about technical preparation.
I don't know what it's going to do now. It's probably just going to show the still images. Okay. It connected.
I'm waiting for
Alright.
another
It's
one.
going to go for you.
You guys hit the mute button first, just to be sure. I'll do it at the end of the month.
Okay, so are we going to shut this down?
Yeah, that's
So
what
we
I'm
can
trying
keep
to do.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. And thanks, Spence. And we appreciate hearing from your summers. Moving on to Justine Schneider, who did an internship with Huntington Playhouse in Bay Village, Ohio.
Yes. So my internship started by me taking the auditioning class in the fall, much like Katie, and we were looking into different opportunities we could take over the summer. I went to a few auditions around Ohio, one in West Virginia, trying to see if I was going to acquire an acting role for an internship. That ended up not happening, but through that research I was able to find local theaters in my area who kind of would give me an opportunity to expand on my technical aspects that I enjoy doing. So as I was looking around, I found Huntington Playhouse, which I had gone to one of their productions before a few years ago, and it had never really crossed my mind to look into local theaters for some reason, but I was very glad when I found that opportunity, mostly because it really opened my eyes to all the different aspects of theater that I can do, because community theater is everywhere. So they always have jobs and they're always looking for people to kind of come in. And as soon as I had applied for them, they immediately responded, were more than willing to have my help and learn from me as well. They were really interested in kind of picking up some of the things that I've learned through the college experience and through different shows that I worked on in high school, and just see my different technique and how they can kind of pick up from me as well, and then they can also teach me. So as I was looking around, Huntington Playhouse was doing A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum again, which I had just been doing in the spring semester last year here, assistant designing with Jeff. So I had already gotten a good grasp of that musical through all that process, doing props and set. So it really opened up my eyes to that musical, and it gave me that extra boost of confidence being able to go into a new theater and be able to feel comfortable kind of tackling that responsibility. So when I sent out their email, I sent some of the image research that I had done with Jeff, some of the final realized set pieces and pictures for them to see kind of what I had already done, and they were more than willing to have me come in and do the seating design for them, which was very shocking to me. I wasn't expecting to be the designer. And it started off with us being doing conversations about if I was going to be assistant designing or if I was actually going to be designing, but the more that I had talked to the managing director, Tom, he decided that I was just going to be the seating designer, and I was just going to take on that responsibility. So my work at Huntington Playhouse didn't immediately start with Forum. It started off with me helping out with their set construction and just basic backstage kind of help before the shows went up. And that started off with me helping out with striking their first show of their summer season, The Drowsy Chaperone, where I got to meet their entire cast and crew for that production. The crew that helps deconstruct each set generally helps put up the next set, and then you don't see them again, because it's the actors that come in, which was really interesting to me. And then I got to meet a few of their regular techies and begin to know their company. So after we had begun putting up the next show, The Perfect Wedding, I continuously came in at 10 a.m. for the rest of the summer, helping out with the rest of their shows. The Perfect Wedding, it was pretty much basic set construction. I helped tape seams, paint, nothing very technical, just kind of helping out around. But it really helped me learn about their space more, get good inventory of their stock before we did Forum. And as I was wandering around their space, I got to really get an understanding of what I was going to do for their next show, which was Forum. And a few weeks into the process, I started in June, so a few weeks into June, I had begun actually discussing with Tom, the managing director, what we were going to do for Forum. And trying to see if I could discuss anything with the director of the show or the costume designer to kind of start picking out color. And the more I decided, to try and head up that team, the more I realized that communication was not going to happen in this process. So that was a big thing that I learned this summer, was that communication is very important in theater. Mostly just because if you don't have communication, things don't get done, and they don't get done properly if they do get done. So it was disappointing at first to me, finding out that the director wasn't going to communicate properly because he didn't have a real good concept of his own that he was going off of. He was kind of winging it, which was unfortunate. But the more I kind of discussed with him, the more it kind of helped him kind of solidify a concept. So that was kind of interesting to have those conversations every once in a while. And the same kind of was going on with the costume designer, because the costume designer was also designing for Chicago in that same time vicinity. So he wasn't focusing on Forum at all, which is another big musical. And the more I discussed with him the kind of colors I was choosing for the show as I came up with them, the more he kind of started understanding that maybe he should start taking responsibility as well for his own work. So that was just a bit of the communication problems that I experienced, but it helped me learn a lot and helped me see that no matter what aspect I'm doing in theater, I really need to communicate with everyone efficiently. And so a lot of my design process ended up going through Tom, the managing director of Huntington Playhouse, and Ron, which was the in-residence scenic artist. So I had worked with them primarily the entire summer. And as I worked on Forum, I kind of used a bit of our research that we had done here, but adapted to the different ideas that I was hearing from the director for their production. The more that I came up with color research, the more we liked the idea of a color wheel being present on the stage. So, kind of taking a bit of each color from the color wheel and using that to bring out the different houses in the set. So Marcus Lycus was more of the warm tones, more yellows and oranges. Senex was more of the royal purples, lavender kind of colors, and Erroneous was more of the earthen tones. We used a lot of like seafoam, kind of teal, and wood graining to kind of make his house seem the more rustic of the other two. But as we went through, the set kind of was piecing itself together with the more conversations that we had. And once Perfect Wedding was up, we were really able to focus on Forum, which was nice. And once we had the colors chosen, we were able to kind of see what kind of stock we had already, because I really was keeping budget in mind while I was designing the set, and I ended up kind of taking on the role of scenic charge artist as well, which was me taking on the responsibility of budgeting the paint costs and choosing the color palette and making sure that the painting crew, which is primarily only myself, and sometimes Ron, which is the in-house scenic artist, taking on all the tasks. So I learned a lot about budgeting, surprisingly, through that experience as well. So I had looked through their stock, because they had a stock of paint already, kind of chose the colors that they already had that we could work off of, and bought the lowest, cost paint possible, kind of looked through all their color swatches of, different paint stores that they had around the area, Sherwin-Williams, Walmart, all of that, nothing expensive, and chose the least amount of paint that I could find fitting the square foot coverage of the set after we had made up the ground plan. And all of the set pieces were primarily soft flats, which means they were made of like canvas rather than being hard flats like we use here. So they had been primarily painted already, so a lot of the paint wasn't going to be absorbed by it, so I kind of had an understanding from my scenic painting classes and just my experience using paint that I knew how much to kind of buy. So once we bought the paint, a lot of the rest of the few weeks of work was base coating everything, because base coating always takes forever. And so we base coated all the flats, all the floor. We decided how to spatter the floor. We just kind of used like this machine that's actually used for like spraying your lawn. And we diluted the paint down a lot with water so that it could come out of the sprayer without clogging it. And we sprayed the floor really quick. And that was the least time consuming of all of our paint jobs, because the floor isn't really seen that much, but it helps a lot with light balance. And the interesting thing with light balance in the show was that we found out that the lighting designer was nicknamed the Prince of Darkness for his lack thereof with lighting. So that was another influencing factor when I was choosing color palette, was I picked a lot of colors that would help with light balance, knowing that the lighting designer wasn't going to really light this big, bright body musical. You know, so I tried to help, you know, as much as I could with that aspect. Yeah. So as we were base coating everything, I came back and started deciding texture for each of the houses. I wanted each of the houses to have their own texture to differentiate between each of them, because each house has their own very different cast of characters that come through. And even when the characters start claiming they're from other houses, each of the houses have to have their own presence. So that was an interesting research experience where I was trying to decide sort of textures to use. I had been involved with the scene and painting class, and you know, started picking up on different techniques I could do that were quick and efficient. So a lot of the work that I ended up doing was sponge techniques, because I found out that sponges really help move the process along rather than trying to do very intricate detail. The distance that most of the flat covering the set were at a distance back on the stage, so far upstage that you wouldn't get to see too much detail, which made me kind of take that into account as I was picking up textures. Senex ended up being a stone marble, so there were no veining through it, since you wouldn't be able to really see that from the house distance. And that ended up being a form of like 3 different colors, and a lot of just kind of experimental work with just trying to see how the textures would line up with the rest of the flattage, the flat coverage. I used a lot of white in that to help with the light balance, and it ended up becoming like this really nice lavender hint of like a stone marble. Lycus's house ended up having kind of an archway for the door, so I ended up going with like a stucco type of feel, so that there's like that arch prevalence within the rest of the texturing. And the flats were orange with that yellow texturing over it. And Erroneous was primarily that seafoam green with kind of like a darker teal on top of it, with wood graining techniques used around the perimeter of the actual house to kind of make it feel like it's partially wood, partially this like other type of you know, structure. So as I was doing that, I kept on experimenting around with paint, and I had already kind of had like a good experience with paint, and I had gotten to kind of experiment a lot on how to do different techniques through forum here over the spring. So when I got there, I kind of had a good idea of what I wanted to do. And as soon as I went to their first tech actual run and I got to see the lighting, I got to see how the lighting really did affect the set, and how much the basic light that, you know, the Prince of Darkness was throwing on there really washed everything out. So I had to bring up the contrast in the colors a lot more and bring up that value so that I could make sure that the audience was able to see all the texturing work that I had actually done on it, rather than just looking at this blank, you know, canvas. So I went back the next day and went through and made sure to pop out that contrast a bit more, make it a bit more prevalent. And it looked ridiculous when the lights weren't on it, because there was so much contrast. And then as soon as the lights were on it, it washed it all out and kind of made it blend together a bit more, which was nice. So most of the show was that, just kind of the experimental work. A lot of it was only me, which was it was challenging, but it was very inspiring at the same time, because I got to know that I was able to take on the role of charge artist by myself and paint this entire set pretty much by myself. And it was the first time that I could ever really claim doing that, because even in high school we always had all of the cast would come in for paint calls, and even here we had other people in the scenic painting class and other actors coming in helping base coat everything. So it was a new experience for me having to take on that entire role, and as well as being a designer. So that took up a lot of my summer, and that was my main internship. And once the show went up, it got good reviews. A lot of people said that they enjoyed the set, that they felt that the colors really helped pop out the actors' work and influence their take on the show, because it helped lighten up their view on it, since there's like all the bright colors and there's a lot to look at, but it wasn't distracting, I heard, which was nice to hear, because I hate when sets are kind of distracting away from the show as well. So that was really good. It helped make me feel a lot better about what I had done, since I had been working primarily by myself with 2 other experienced technical crew. I still didn't really exactly know how well things were going, besides like my own viewpoints. So it was nice to get to hear audience response after the first show and understand that what I had done was a good job. And then after that, I received the opportunity to continue working with Huntington Playhouse and take up the role of scenic charge artist again on their production of Man La Mancha. And that was, I wasn't expecting to work on that show at all. It opened, I think, 2 days before I would be coming back here to start stage managing for the productions opening next week. So they were just like, oh, you're in town, you only live like 20 minutes away, can you come work on this show too? And I was like, yeah. And all of this was non-paid. It was just kind of helping my resume and just helping me build contacts and get to experience theater over the summer. I wasn't really expecting a paycheck. So I came in, they already had the set design, figured out, and it was, they had the ground plan. There was no paint elevations, there's nothing else besides just the ground plan and the basic idea from the director, who was the managing director, Tom, who I had been working with all summer. So he pretty much came in and he was like, well, you know colors really well, come pick out, colors, come, help us out. And I went in, he didn't really have any idea what he wanted. He knew kind of the feeling that he was going for with the show, with how Man La Mancha primarily takes place in the jail and then has to transform into all these other worlds. And we just kind of sat down and had a full day of just discussing different things that he was kind of thinking of. And as we did that, I pulled out some of the color swatches that I'd been looking through for him before, and just picked out some light colors to help again with light bounce, since we have the same lighting designer. And that was a lot of my summer, learning how light bounced off paint. And as I picked out the color swatches, I again took stock of their inventory and got to see what they already had. And we bought some paint and we started base coating everything again. And there's even more soft flats in this production than there were in Forum. So there's even more base coating to be done. A lot of the walls were all 12 feet by, I think it was like 12 feet by 3 feet. And there was probably the entire back wall was that. So probably 16 feet coverage of 12-foot soft flats to be painted alone just for the back wall covering. So there's a lot of painting to be done there. After base coating was done, I then decided to kind of rough up the walls a bit, because it was supposed to be this dark, dreary jail that it had to transform into. Sometimes it was a really homey environment, sometimes it was a very terrifying environment. So I decided to use sponge techniques in order to kind of bring up different shapes in the walls and just kind of dirty up the walls with that wash of paint with the sponge, but make it so that the audience could really interpret what they saw as each scene went on, because I wasn't sure what the lighting was going to be, if the lighting was going to help influence when we were in a more realistic environment opposed to when they were telling the story of the play, Man La Mancha. So I just kind of went for it and tested out on some spray sheets of glue on what the texturing would look like, and I passed it by Tom, and he ended up really liking it. So I spent the rest of the, I mostly spent the rest of the time texturing a lot of the walls with that sponge technique, which was interesting because we did it so that all the walls were down first, and we would go into the stage towards like the very end of our process and then put up all the walls. So once all the walls were up, I had to relook at all of them and make sure all the texturing kind of blended together because I had done them all separately. And of course, you know, they didn't look right when they were all put up next to each other if I didn't take the extra effort to make the texturing kind of flow into the next one. And once we did that, we decided that the set was too, like, it looked nice, but it was a bit bland. So I decided to kind of throw out the idea of adding in stone technique around the archways and on some of the platforming that would be the escape routes and the escape masking flats, because the masking flats were black and they were, again, soft flats. So I was like, well, we could just kind of paint some stone technique over them and make it look like it's like the stone hallway kind of leading off into a different part of the jail. And it would, you know, help kind of give some, you know, visual qualities that the audience could kind of take in rather than just kind of leaving it just black and, you know, this textured white, like off-white set. And, you know, so it was a great idea, and then I had to paint all of it by myself. And, which was fun. The more I did stone technique, the more I kind of acquired a better skill than I had been researching in the spring. I took some of Jeff's techniques that he had shown us in the singing painting class and kind of refined them to what I needed to do for this production. And the more I did it, the more I realized like how to kind of do it faster and make it look, you know, the same as I had done when I was taking my time on it. And really get to experiment with that. And the more I did it, the more the in-residence scenic artist, Ron, would come up to me and he'd be like, how are you doing that? You know, and so we started off a lot of conversations with that. Just kind of him taking notes of what I was doing, which was very shocking because he had been working at Huntington Playhouse since the 70s. And he ended up telling me at the end of the process that this was the best 6 weeks that he had ever had. So that was very heartfelt. And it was really fun because Tom would always come by whenever I was painting, and he'd always like look over at Ron and be like, you taking notes? And it just made me feel really good that I knew that I had really learned something while I was here, and I was able to kind of go off and really take charge of you know, set design and being a charge artist by myself without really having any form of communication with anyone besides the knowledge that I had acquired, and just really taking lead by myself. So that was pretty much my entire internship, was kind of learning communication, learning the values of being able to have confidence in your work, regardless as to how much experience you've had, and really taking leadership and owning what you do, which really was beneficial to me when I came back here and kind of gave me a new confidence about, you know, the path that I've chosen in life with theater, knowing that I'm able to go off and do something on my own. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Huntington Playhouse also offered me a job to come back and work with them next summer if I don't have another internship opportunity anywhere else, which is nice. So I've known that I have that place I can always go back to. That was my primary internship for the summer.
Thanks, Justine. And that ask back is one of those great gifts that artists give one another to say, I value your work, and you can use me as a reference in many ways. You know, it's that ask back moment in life is so important. Speaking of an ask back, I'd like to ask Thomas and Sharon and Jim to fill in the chairs along with the faculty. We'll sort of smoosh a little bit more of what we did over the summer into one moment. So we'll need to grab some additional parlor chairs. Yeah, it's true. I did leave you there. Chairs, stools, sit-a-pons. So maybe if we just quickly name what you did this summer that was related to developing yourself further in theater or learning more in theater. Start with you.
I'll start with me. The first thing I did wasn't exactly during summer. It was during the winter break, right before we came back at the beginning of the semester. I had gone out to Circuit 21 Dinner Playhouse to do a lighting design out there. That was my 5th aspect. So I keep going back there because I like them, they like me. It was a good experience. Professional dinner theater, a lot of folks in from all over. Over the summer, I went up to Chicago. I had worked before I had gone back to grad school. Part of my lighting roots, I had left theater for a little while and did corporate concert industrial lighting. So the entertainment lighting business, basically. And I kept strong connections with the company that I work with up there. So every year, I call them up to see if you have anything. And I like to stay current with the technology, with the work, and the different types of people. So I did a little bit of work with them this summer as well. So.
I have my 3rd year tenure review this year, and there's a lot of work to do on that. So I had every intention of taking the summer off and actually working on assessment and those things. So instead, I directed a staged reading of a new work in Athens, Ohio, for the Seabury Quinn Jr. Playwriting Festival, and then I was offered a position. A friend of mine contacted me and asked if I could come up to Canada and play both Claudius and the Ghost in a production of Hamlet up at it's a new theater company. Well, it's this young man who in high school started sort of a community theater company called the New Valley Players in New Brunswick. Now, New Brunswick, as a province, has one professional theater company. It's called Theater New Brunswick, and that's it. They have one. And it's in Fredericton, which is about an hour away from Woodstock, which is where we were. And Woodstock is just over the border from Maine, about 10, 15 minutes over the border from Maine. But this young man who started a theater company in high school called the Valley Young Players, because they live in a valley and they were all very young. Now they've been through graduate school, and some of them are still in graduate school, but a lot of them have been out of it. And their theater is getting more and more successful, and they're to a point now where they don't just want to hire people from the valley, and they're not all young. So they, this was their first year stepping into the world of professional theater. So it was really interesting. It's this community theater group that in their first year, they had a very big budget and hired some actors to come in and play Polonius, the Player King, myself, Claudius and King Hamlet. Hamlet and Gertrude were all paid. And Hamlet and Gertrude were 2 actors who I'd worked with before, which is as a director, which is how I got the job. So it was a really interesting experience. So it was paid, and they put us up, and they fed us, and they were very nice. But at the same time, they were this fledgling sort of company. It's called Hot House Theater. They did very well, and the only theater in the entire town of Woodstock is at the local high school. So you just have to imagine working with unlimited budget and paid professional actors, but at the local high school theater, So they, the lighting rig they rented was unbelievable, because they just would rent whatever you need. We'd be like, we need guns, replica guns that look like AK-47s, and they'd just buy them. So it was good. It was the main reason I did it was because as an acting instructor, I feel like it's important for me to and acting isn't necessarily my favorite thing to do as a theater artist anymore, but I feel like it's important for me to memorize lines and go through the beats and actions of a character and get up on stage and have stage fright and mess up the lines and do some combat and put makeup on and do all of those things so that I don't forget how to do it and what's important about it when I teach it. And I learned a lot. I learned so much from this experience. It's been a long time since I've done a role of that size. And when you add the Ghost to it, it's just a doozy of a part. So I learned a lot, and it was very successful. Standing ovations every night. It was a ton of fun. Not for me, Hamlet was really good. But there you go. That's what I did.
Excellent.
Off-year high school and Rangeville Middle School.
These three students, Jim, Sharon, and Thomas, were all at Huron Theater Festival. Huron Theater.
Huron Playhouse.
Huron Playhouse.
Yeah. Huron Playhouse in Huron, Ohio. I was also, like Andy felt, planning on doing absolutely nothing and enjoying it this summer. And then Thomas was like, "Hey Jim, you want a job?" And I was like, "Sure." And
How did that kind of power?
that's kind of what happened.
I mean, that's kind of what happened, but I didn't hire you.
No. Anyway, he got me in contact with the person who was running it, Jen Glenn, is her name, and we started talking through email, and we just gave her my resume, and she was like, "Great, looks like we could hire you." And she brought me on for as a lighting assistant, master electrician, which is what I was wanting to do this past summer, and came in, ended up getting the chance to design a show after I proved to them I was competent, considering we had never met except through email, and here's my resume. So I got to design a show. It was really great, and got paid, got food, got bored, as in a place to sleep.
Bored every day.
So what happened was Thomas got a job there acting. We have sort of like a long line of Marietta people who have gone to the Huron Playhouse.
A long blue line. That's true.
Goes what, like 8 years back.
Brittany Koser lives.
Patrick.
Yeah.
Brittany was before Patrick. She worked there since she was like -3.
Whatever.
Brittany Koser lived in the area and was very familiar and was working there since she was like a little kid. So yeah, that's sort of how Thomas got the job. He worked there last summer, and then Jan emailed Thomas and said, we need technicians, do you know anyone? And he told me and Jim, and it was great. And all you have to do basically is say, "I know Brittany Koser," and they trust her so much.
It's one of those great examples of, this college didn't have a relationship with that company until we had a student enter our environment, and then that sets off a network of networking. And then that person's reputation can lift you up as well. And that's really one of the wonderful things about this small community. Just a learning point.
Yeah, I think 6 Huron people, or
Yep.
6 Marietta people have been working there. Patrick, Laura, yeah. Us. So I was hired as a sound assistant. There's another sound person there who majors in sound design at Wright State, and I've done sound design for one show. I've soundboard operated one show, so I sort of know it, but I don't know it. He knows it. He's been doing it for years and majors in it, and he taught me so much. I sort of felt like I was getting paid to learn. It was just like, I just learned so much every day. I played with Pro Tools, which is a very expensive sound program. And it was a middle school, and we had to figure out how to put all the sound stuff we needed into this middle school, and work with our very limited budget, not having enough XLR cable.
And then I broke it.
And I don't know, it was great. I was assistant sound designer for 5 shows and a board op for 1 show, and yeah, that's about it.
Cool.
Want to go?
Yeah, sure. So last year I worked there as a props assistant with Brittany Koser, who you've been hearing about, and for their 5th production of the season last year, they needed extra guys to be in the ensemble for a state fair, which is a fantastic musical. And so I got to be in that, and it was a really good experience. It was a good experience for me overall, just because I got to see other peers who were getting paid to perform, and I got to look at it and go, I can do that. That's easy. It's not easy, but I could do that. So then I went back to OTAs, the big Ohio Theater Alliance auditions last winter, and the Huron Playhouse offered me a job as an actor and lighting and sound technician and assistant as well. So I got to perform in 4 of the 5 productions. I got the role that I really wanted in the season, which was awesome. I helped out with sound and lights, and it was a good time. Got paid, made some friends.
And you assistant directed.
And I assistant directed. That was fantastic. That was completely unexpected. thing that I wrote on the audition form, like, I've got some experience directing, assistant directing, I've got some training, like I'd love to assistant direct, and the director of the second show was like really excited about that, and he gave me like 5 scenes to block and direct and do scene work by myself. And it was really cool working with like a dedicated company of actors, because they all know, they all know the shorthand, so you can be in rehearsal and there's not as much, that you have to, you can kind of just speak their shorthand and they're like, yeah, I got it. And then, I don't know, it was really cool. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. So yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
My summer was actually divided into 2 separate but equal projects. My first part of my summer was I was awarded a PIG grant, a professional improvement grant, from the Faculty Development Committee, and I went to London for 2.5 weeks and attended a 5-day millinery workshop in hat making, focusing mostly on what I call fancy dress or couture hats, rather than sort of the theatrical millinery that I've been used to working in New York City, doing shows like Mary Poppins. But I got a chance to sort of work with a woman named Rose Corey, who was actually the Queen Mom's milliner before she passed. And so I got to learn a lot of new skills, sort of what I call dainty hat making. And so I spent 5 days at the workshop learning these techniques. I went there hoping to build 3 hats, and I built 5. So I thought that was pretty good. I actually built one in Hyde Park because my days at the workshop had ended, and I sort of had all these bits left, and I was like, I'm just going to make another hat. So I just brought everything to the park and sat in the park and built a hat, because that's what you do in London. But also I attended many museums. I went to the gallery one day, the National Gallery. I spent a day at the Victoria and Albert, really studying their theater performance section, because they have an entire sort of semi-floor that's all theater performance, pictures and costume pieces and masks and set models that you can actually press a button and they'll light from different directions, which was fun because I just would sit there and like press buttons and see how they would change. But so I got to do a lot of museums. All of my hats are on display in the library, so if you want to check out what I created, it's all there. I sort of created a line of hats. They ended up turning into a line called Across the Pond, and it was sort of inspired by my flight over to London, which happened in the early evening, morning time, because I didn't want to miss a day. And then I attended 9 theater performances while I was over there. I saw The Cherry Orchard with Zoe Wanamaker, who's a great British actress. And then I spent 2 evenings at the Globe Theatre. I also went and attended a lecture there as well while I was in between shows. And then I saw Billy Elliot and Legally Blonde, and one of my favorite shows, which is Harold Pinter's Betrayal, which I'm directing a Harold Pinter piece in this next week. So I thought that was a great way to sort of take my learning that I'm going to be doing this fall and sort of put it into practice in May. I also spent about 3 days at the British Museum, or the British Library, sorry, and went through the Harold Pinter archives because they acquired all of his essays and writings. So I spent some time there getting to know Harold Pinter on a more intimate basis, and then came home and had about 2 weeks off, and then went and did my second part of my professional development, which was being the resident costume designer at Weathervane Playhouse in Newark, Ohio. I was set to do 2 shows there, Sound of Music in Chicago, both musicals, and then throughout the summer, the previous artistic director had passed away last year, and he was a really good friend of mine, and so they decided to do sort of a benefit performance to raise money to build a new building on their facility in his name, which was called The Good War, and it was actually a musical collage in the 1940s. And what's really great about Weathervane Playhouse is they have an amazing vintage theater stock of costumes and dresses, and they sort of hit well between the 40s and the 60s. So anything in there is a really nice time period for us to do, and actually all three of our shows were 40s, 50s, and 60s. Chicago ended up being a little bit of a 20s throwback, but a sort of modern take on it, and so it was a really fun experience. We got really, really good reviews. The Good War actually wrote an entire sort of write-up about the costumes, which I was really excited about, because most of the time I get overlooked as a designer because it's like, oh, they're just wearing clothes, and they look good in them. Move on. So I did 3 shows with them. My contract was about 6 weeks long with them, and I lived in Newark, and actually will be probably returning to Newark, helping them consult when they built the new building as far as creating the new costume storage space and the new costume shop there. So I'll be their coordinator for that.
Really short and sweet. Most of my summer was just working on some facilities revamping, and then I played a game of literal Facebook. I wanted to reconnect with some people, family members and artistic director friends and actor friends, and trying to get as many people as I knew in one area. So it was really fun to be on a trip with Keziah Felt to go see Renee's show in Newark, where I had worked and done some of my summer intern work, and bring all those worlds together. It was really amazing to go and see the DC Actors Salon, which is an equity reading group, a very informal equity actor level reading group that takes over the 2nd floor of a restaurant called Darlington House on DuPont Circle. And I helped kick that off 2 years ago, and it's still living and thriving, and got to meet an artistic director who I was destined to meet, named Kristen, and we got to swap work tales. But then I got to meet up with Thomas and Jim, who were in the area, and we got to sort of share that experience together with a previous Marietta College instructor, Lisa Granby, who in some way ties us all together in some bizarre way. So sort of playing that literal network all summer, and then, you know, keeping tabs on alumni and current students at work and putting them in conversation with each other as much as I could, or keeping the fires burning from home, which I learned a lot from as we all sailed off and ran into one another. And so, but thanks so much. We have a couple minutes for questions as we wrap this up, if there are. Yeah.
Well, I'm just really pleased to see, in terms of the faculty and the department being professionally active during the summer. And it's a great way to obviously to stay connected to the field, but also be a role model in terms of the students. And the second item is the importance of networking in the alumni. So someday you will be in that position to give back. So don't forget that.
That was it, yes.
Great.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that Dr. Perucci and I have talked a lot about over the summer now as the year started to the students, that one of the things we hope that we can all do at the college, the faculty and the staff, is help all students raise their expectations and find their calling. And so as I was listening to most of this talk, it sounds like that's what you're doing, that you're finding the calling even within the world of theater. Is it technical, or is it being up front? So I just think it's great that I think the theater faculty have been at the forefront of this at Marietta College for a long time, helping students not just take their classes, but figure out within the discipline, what do you actually want to do with theater? You know, I mean, yeah, you know, it's not just Glee, right? You know, what do you mean, Mark?
Everything's Glee.
So
I gotta go.
Yeah, so I think that's great that you're doing that, and you know, to hear Andy talk about what he was doing, I think it's good modeling for the students to know that your faculty are theater professionals. I mean, it's really what all of you are doing, but just something about the way Andy was talking about it. That, yeah, I mean, as Andy's preparing for his major evaluation, he's doing what he's teaching you all to be doing. So I think that's fantastic.
I guess I would add two things that I noticed. You know, I work with all students and all interests, and that's what I love about what I do. there are so many themes that run across this campus that remind me that we're at a liberal arts institution and we are all connected. And I always tell students that, you know, sometimes I don't like the fact that in academia we have artificial boundaries such as majors. And this is one of those events where a lot of what you shared tonight is what I hear from the petroleum students. It's what I hear from the communication students. And I think I just wanted to share that because it just really resonated with me tonight. And then the other thing I would say is, as a career counselor, I had like 12 different majors in undergrad because I wanted to do it all. And when I leave tonight, I want to go back to undergrad and be a theater major.
We'll take you anytime.
Tell all the undeclares that.
Yeah.
Anyone who's undeclared, send them our way.
Take that. Other questions or thoughts?
What is your favorite sound?
What is my favorite?
Did you just become James Lipton?
There we go. I've always wanted to ask somebody on stage.
When you don't have God say.
What is your favorite color?
My favorite sound is actually the moment in theater where it goes completely silent, and yet in that moment you feel gifted to know what's going on inside the actor's brain, and you can feel the audience unravel that puzzle all at the same time. That full silence of discovery of the power of the human psychology. You know?
Jeff's been waiting for a minute.
Bring it on, Lipton. It's true.
No, that's I like that.
That's something
hearing what's going on in their head.
Yeah, it's very special to me.
That's exactly what my answer would have been.
Oh my God, get out of my brain.
Get out of my brain!
I have to stop pausing. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight and sharing these ideas. And I hope what it does is it sparks a conversation and keeps us hungry to get involved. I mean, that's the thing, to get involved and get ourselves out there. It's a feed loop, and it's getting stronger as the department becomes clearer and keeps charting a direction. And raising expectations with ourselves. And I know that means we work harder, but I think that's what we came here to do. I don't think anyone comes to college for 4 years of easy. Certainly not here, and certainly not in a place where we have to work together daily. So, great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you.
And come see the shows. Next Friday it opens. You'll love it.
So much.
Off the record, space. I didn't really think that.
Doug Anderson and I always have conversations about his house.
Oh, okay.
So she was scary. He used to show up and I'd be like, so what's this hat? Where did you get it? Let's talk about it for a second. So, I knew the history of all of this hat.
Andrew and I were